Morning, Hickory family. I've got a little bit of a different setup. My face is closer to you now. Um, and also, the camera's directly in front of my face rather than kind of like elevated a little bit. It's also underneath my monitor rather than above it. So I'm going to be looking over you, which I think is worse. So I'm going to try and, when I'm thinking about it, look into the camera, and hopefully that's not weird. Um, yeah. So last week we started a very brief devotional with Nikki Gumbel about Jesus. And so we're going to go through the second day of that. And again, it's very short. But then we're going to read a little bit about something else. All right. All right. So we're starting in Mark 10, verse 35. Jesus teaches about serving others. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. What is your request? He asked. Great way to start a conversation with Jesus. Jesus, I would like you to do me a favor. They replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. But Jesus said to them, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I am about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with? Oh, yes, they replied, we are able. Then Jesus told them, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering, but I have no right to say who will sit on my right or on my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. When the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. So Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and the officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader amongst you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. All right. And we're going into, Jesus is so smart. We're going into Galatians 2, starting with verse 11. Paul confronts Peter. But when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterward, when some friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. When I saw that they were not following the truth of the gospel message, I said to Peter in front of all the others, since you, a Jew by birth, have discarded the Jewish laws and are living like a Gentile, why are you now trying to make these Gentiles follow the Jewish traditions? You and I are Jews by birth, not sinners like the Gentiles. Yet we know that a person is made right with faith Yet we know that a person is made right with God by faith in Jesus Christ, not by obeying the law. And we have believed in Christ Jesus so that we might be made right with God because of our faith in Christ, not because we have obeyed the law. For one will never be made right with God by obeying the law. But suppose we seek to be made right with God through faith in Christ, and then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. Would that mean Christ has led us into sin? Absolutely not. I'm going to read that again because I was kind of distracted, which is a good practice. If sometimes I read aloud because it helps me focus, and then I feel sillier when I need to go back and reread something. But anyways, but suppose we seek to be made right with God through faith in Christ, and then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. Okay. Sorry. This is just such a, I mean, like, this is a very, I don't know. This is a very interesting sentiment. Read it again. But suppose we seek to be made right with God through faith in Christ, and then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. Would that mean Christ has led us into sin? Absolutely not. Rather, I am a sinner if I rebuild the old system of law I already tore down. Interesting. For when I tried to keep the law, it condemned me, so I died to the law. I stopped trying to meet all its requirements so that I might live for God. That's pretty interesting. My old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not treat the grace of God as meaningless, for if keeping the law could make us right with God, then there was no need for Christ to die. I really like this because I think it really gets to the heart of an idea of, like, you know, I don't know that we should seek to break the law or seek to flaunt or ignore it. But we should seek to love God and uphold God. And I know Jesus says, like, he didn't come to tear down the law, but to fulfill it. And so there's, like, nuance in language here. But that Paul chooses to live for God and not be afraid of the law, I think is a good way to phrase it. And I think that's wonderful. All right. So now this is a section by Nicky Gumbel. Why did he come and why did he die? Jesus is the only man who has ever chosen to be born, and he is one of the few who has chosen to die. He said that the entire reason for his coming was to die for us. He came to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus said he died for us. The word for means instead of. He did it because he loved us and did not want us to have to pay the penalty for all the wrong things that we had done. On the cross, he was effectively saying, I will take all those things on myself. He did it for you, and he did it for me. If you or I had been the only person in the world, he would have done it for us. St. Paul wrote of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It was out of love for us that he gave his life as a ransom. The word ransom comes from the slave market. A kind person might buy a slave and set him free, but first the ransom price had to be paid. Jesus paid, by his blood on the cross, the ransom price to set us free. Amazing. Wonderful. And I don't have anything else particularly on my mind. So I pulled up this weekend. The confirmands and Pastor Sarah and some parents and I are going to DC and Baltimore, and we're going to see some cool stuff. One of the things we're going to see is the Lovely Lane United Methodist Church. This is something that I really was not familiar with. And I'm excited to kind of, like, get to know it a little bit. But essentially, Lovely Lane, we're going to read a little bit of the history about to get to know our Methodist roots a little better. And it is essentially, like, kind of one of the founding churches of Methodism in the U.S. And so we're going to go and we're going to worship there this Sunday, which means I need someone to cover tech, and I have not found that yet. So, Kathy, if you're watching this, so sorry. You're going to get a text from me probably tomorrow. Anyways, um, yeah, so I'm just quite literally going to read a section from, which again, Lovely Lane United Methodist Church is an active UMC, like it has a meeting congregation. And so I'm going to read something from its website. History of Lovely Lane. The original Lovely Lane Meeting House was built in 1774. In 1784, following the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, the Methodists in America called a conference for the purpose of organizing a new Methodist denomination, famously known as the Christmas Conference. They gathered at the Lovely Lane Meeting House, and a new denomination was born, the Methodist Episcopal Church. If you give me a second, I'm going to go ahead and close my door because I'm recording this kind of late, and I don't want my voice to carry too much and bother my housemates. Anyways, John Wesley had reluctantly agreed to the American Methodists' desire to organize their own church. He sent Thomas Cook to supervise the process and to consecrate Francis Asbury as general superintendent of the Methodists in America. When Coke and Asbury met at Barrett's Chapel in November 1784, Asbury refused the appointment unless the preachers elected him. The meeting was scheduled for the next month, December, at Lovely Lane Meeting House in Baltimore. Freeborn Garretson was sent like an arrow, in Coke's words, to contact as many preachers as possible to meet in Baltimore. Garretson recorded in his journal, "My dear master enabled me to ride about 1,200 miles in about 6 weeks and preach going and coming constantly. The conference began on Christmas Day. More than 60 preachers and numerous visitors responded to Garretson's call." Francis Asbury records in his journal for Friday, December 24th, 1784, "It was agreed to form ourselves into an Episcopal church and to have superintendents, elders, and deacons. When the conference was seated, Dr. Coke and myself were unanimously elected to the superintendency of the church, and my ordination followed. We spent the whole week in conference, debating freely and determining all things by a majority of votes. We were in great haste and did much business in a little time." Besides organizing a church and approving Asbury and Coke as their leaders, I never knew where we got the term Cokesbury from. Never really occurred to me. I'm assuming it's the combination of Coke and Asbury. I'm more familiar with Asbury than Coke. Asbury and Coke as their leaders. The members elected 12 preachers as elders, Wesley's suggested term for fully ordained clergy. The conference also formally adopted the Sunday service, Wesley's abridgment of the English Book of Common Prayer, as the new church's liturgical guide, which, for those of you who have been with me for a very long time, will remember we actually looked through John Wesley's Sunday service and the Book of Common Prayer 1 week. In 1786, the Lovely Lane congregation relocated to nearby Light Street, and the original site was later occupied by the Merchants Club, now 206 East Redwood Street. The original building was taken down, but a plaque marks the location where it stood. The Light Street Church burned down and was rebuilt across the alley also on Light Street. Baltimore City wanted to widen Light Street, and the building was condemned to be demolished. So the congregation moved to Charles Street and Fayette Street, into the building of a daughter congregation who were themselves planning to move to a new building, the now famous Mount Vernon Place Church. But eventually, Baltimore City decided it wanted to widen that street, and that building was condemned to be torn down. Coincidentally, the denomination was approaching its 100th birthday, 1884, and the Council of Bishops directed the congregation of First Church, as it had come to be known, to look for ways to commemorate the centennial. Under the direction of Reverend John Goucher, who enlisted architect Stanford White, a new and monumental building was conceived and designed, one which would incorporate elements of early Christian basilicas and modern Methodist meeting houses. The cornerstone was laid on October 29, 1884, and the building was dedicated November 6, 1887, as First Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1955, the congregation voted to return to their original name of Lovely Lane. The present building is on the National Register of Historic Places and was named as one of the American Institute of Architects' 100 most important buildings in North America. It is currently home to the United Methodist Historical Society Museum and the Baltimore Washington Conference Archives. Today, the Lovely Lane congregation is committed to the ministry of witness for the many visitors and confirmands from around the country and around the world who make this pilgrimage a destination. At the same time, we remain a community, church, and a neighborhood anchor. So that's pretty cool, and I'm sure we'll get some good photos and videos, and they'll be on the Facebook site or whatever. But I'm looking forward to that with the confirmands, and it should be a good time. Get to see something new, and we'll of course be going to the Bible Museum as well, or maybe not, of course, but we'll be going. And we'll also be going to the Baltimore Aquarium, which I'm excited for personally, and Sarah chose, and I'm glad about. But I didn't have to drag anybody around to get us to go to the aquarium. A lot of what I saw in Japan was like aquariums and zoos. That's my vibe. But anyways, let's say a prayer. Hey God, you've had Methodists meeting in America for about 250 years. And I thank you for that chain of believers that has continued to pass down beliefs about grace and habits of meeting. I love that they were called meeting houses, that I get to be a part of the family and community of believers that has continued to meet like a family. I look forward to this weekend with the youth and with some parents. I hope that you look after everyone here at home. In your name.